Hey all, here OS Reviews. Today we're taking a quick look at the Cleer Arc 2 Sports. These are a pair of open-sounding wireless headphones, which, as the name implies, is meant for sports. If you're exercising, going to the gym, it's going to stay in place. And they are similar to something like the AirPods, for instance, because they don't actually stick all the way into your ear canals, but rest on the outside. Kind of also reminiscent of some bone conduction headsets, but these are still using speakers and drivers here to emit sound, but it's not going to provide a super tight seal. So say if you're looking for active noise cancellation to block out the external world, these are not going to be the pair of buds for you, but rather they are designed for, again, staying in place when you're moving, and you still want to hear a bit of what's going on for situational awareness. They have built-in quote-unquote Snapdragon sound, supporting aptX adaptive and even aptX lossless audio codecs, which are pretty flagship grade, also having battery life of 8 hours of continuous music listening, and then the casing will get you an additional 3 top-ups for a combined 27 hours when on the go. IPX5 rated as well, so it's going to resist sweat as well as rain. And two of the other really unique selling points here would be it has a UVC light built on in to reduce bacteria, to clean up the internal part of the buds when you're not wearing them, and there's also motion tracking built on in. So if you're nodding your head and shaking your head, it's able to answer calls and skip tracks as well. Maybe that's a little bit more on the gimmicky side, but still something interesting, and it's all controllable using their companion app for iOS or Android. And this comes in 2 colors, either this red version or also a black version, a little bit more conservative, but as something which is a little bit more flagship grade, it's also not necessarily cheap, priced at around $190. So these are definitely competing with more well-known options, including Power Beats. Then we have just a quick user guide and a USB Type-C charging cable. So a closer look at the design of this battery case. It's actually coated in fabric, which makes it very easy to grip. I initially assumed that it would be more of a squishy, soft case, but aside from that texture on the top, it actually is still a rigid case that doesn't actually press down. And aside from the Cleer logo, the back here just has the USB Type-C charging port. Although I would like to see the presence of Qi wireless charging added, maybe into a next-gen variant. The casing here, by the way, is definitely a bit larger compared to your conventional pair of buds in order to make room for the extra hooks that have to be attached into the design, but overall it's not too thick, so it can still slide into a pocket relatively easily, and at the very least it is significantly smaller than the original Powerbeat Pros when it comes to their thickness, as you can tell there. Now, popping these open, there is a hinge mechanism that will turn the buds automatically on, and there's a little bit of an accent light there in blue, which is dramatic just for the visual effect, because the UVC light is actually a separate little piece there underneath that you can't really see once the buds are in place. Pretty easy to remove and pop on in. As you can tell, the top here is also made out of a kind of soft felt material that closes the entire thing off. There's also just a simple reset key there on the middle. Now, a closer look at the design of the Arc 2s, they have also a touch-sensitive area on the top, which is pretty responsive for things like play, pause, skip track command. The top is made out of silicone, so it's very soft and relatively comfy, but then the stem at the bottom is a little bit more weighted, and I believe it's also where the battery is located, so the actual bud part can be slightly more light as a result. Charging contacts, as well as the grill there for the drivers, which by the way are 16.3 millimeters, actually very large for a pair of buds. The average is only around 5 or 6 millimeters, and typically the larger the driver or the speaker size is, you have more impact in terms of bass. As for the wearing experience, you just have to bend it a little bit to pop it over your ear and then just rest on the outside like so. It's a relatively comfy fit, at least in my testing. When I was wearing them for about an hour or two, I didn't have too much fatigue, but it is a one-size-fit-all design compared to something like a silicone tip type of normal buds where you can adjust the fit a little bit more easily. But nonetheless, for again workouts, it still stays in place nicely. By the way, here's a quick comparison with the Powerbeat Pros, just as reference. Similar dimensions, but the hook on these are a little bit more bendable because the battery isn't integrated there, going for noise isolation and blocking out all the sound as opposed to these being transparent transparent and open. Moving into the companion app, first you have to just connect the buds to your phone using regular Bluetooth settings, and then you open up the app and you'll be able to see the battery percentage remaining on the buds as well as the casing. You can also see the number of steps that you've taken because it's using that 6-axis accelerometer for motion control to also act as a pedometer for tracking this metric. With that being said, it's not necessarily the most accurate in the world, and if you do have a smartwatch, it might be already doubling up on that functionality, but still kind of a neat extra. And from here, you can choose between a couple of presets, including jazz, classical, pop, rock, flat, and there's also a custom that you can tweak the sliders in terms of frequency range for boosting segments of the sound, including bass, trebles, mids yourself. Now, you won't get a personalized hearing test mode per se, but this is still quite easy to navigate, and the modes here do make a noticeable difference on the sound once you have them turn on versus turn off. Plus, you do get occasional firmware updates, as you can tell here, which is a benefit of any app-enabled buds, is they can potentially improve in terms of software features. We can also tap on the settings icon here to control what the touch sensors will trigger, including a single, double, and a triple tap. The aforementioned motion control can also be switched on and off from here, so that will allow you to, again, answer calls or reject them by shaking your head versus nodding, as well as music for previous and next track commands, which is pretty neat. And in my testing, these gestures actually worked a little bit better than I was expecting. Versus walking around, maybe just seeing something and tilting my head didn't accidentally trigger the gesture, which is nice. However, you can always turn it off manually if you feel that it's being a little bit too prone to accidental hits. Some extra software features include a anti-loss reminder. So if you are further away from the buds and the Bluetooth range is starting to become more limited, they will beep to give you an alert. However, in terms of tracking, they don't necessarily have GPS, for example, to show its location on a map. You can also turn on a sedentary reminder, so very similar to a smartwatch. If the motion sensors have detected that you've been sitting down for too long, it will beep and tell you to stand up and move around. By the way, these do have multi-point connection, so you are able to connect to multiple devices at once. For example, I can pair to the phone and also to my laptop, and I can play back music on the laptop and then on the phone, and it will pause the laptop's music and then switch over to the phone automatically. And I was pleasantly surprised by the performance here, particularly with the bass response, because my experience with open headphones in the past, especially buds, have been if something doesn't have a very tight seal, it's really easy for the impact to get lost, and you don't necessarily feel as much of that rumble and kick to the vibrations. However, that was definitely not the case with these Arc 2s. Maybe it's because of the extra large drivers, but even though these are resting right outside of your ear canals, you can definitely still appreciate the drum beats and impact from pop and EDM tracks really well. Especially for open style headphones, I would say these are one of the strongest I've had yet. Overall, the mids and trebles were also quite tight and still filled with sufficient detail, which got me sucked into the listening experience. It was loud, it was energetic, and just satisfying for, again, most of the tracks that I was playing. If there is any con, it would be perhaps, since these are still a single driver pair of buds at the end of the day, if you really are an audiophile and you're kind of a hi-fi enthusiast, you can arguably get even more detailed sound out of dual or triple driver solutions that we have seen in the past. But without getting into the nitty-gritty, as a pair of sports-oriented buds, I think the most important part is packing enough volume and get you pumped up, and I think they do a very good job at that already. And in general, a tight connection. I was able to walk around the room, the music never really paused or got interrupted, connection was stable, and playing pause controls all felt pretty fast and seamless. And that's also one part to mention here. With the aptX Adaptive on supported phones, mainly on Android, it will change the latency as well as the bandwidth of data being sent over automatically. And that's why in the companion app, we didn't find a dedicated low latency gaming mode, for instance. But if it detects that you've entered a game on the phone, it should theoretically switch automatically to a lower latency mode. In practice, when I was watching movies and gaming a little bit, I felt like they were still responsive enough with just a split-second delay, but decent. With that being said, I think I would still like to have the ability to turn it on manually if desired. So maybe that's another software trick they could enable via a future update. In terms of the transparency effect, you can still walk around, be aware of, say, a car that's approaching on the street, as well as if someone is talking to you, but the music doesn't become too drowned out either. It's a pretty good mix, I found, in most cases, and although there will be a little bit of sound leakage, it's not bad at all, I have to say. If you're on a subway, someone that is sitting next to you might hear just a faintest bit of that noise, and then anyone else that is moving further kind of drops off pretty significantly. So that is more or less it as far as our quick hands-on review of the Cleer Arc 2 Sports. And in this category, I would dare say that these have one of the best audio experiences in terms of that driver providing much more impact than the vast majority of bone conduction and other open style headphones that I have tried out. If you are looking for a pretty stylish, sports-oriented pair of buds. You can learn more details if interested in the links down below, but for now that's been our video. Thanks for watching here at OS Reviews. That's been the Cleer Arc 2 Sports.